improved a little bit in Chicago. We still have an air quality action day in Northwest Indiana until midnight tonight. 88 degrees right now at O'Hare, 89 in Waukegan. The heat index feels like 91. So it's another hot day around town, but at least the air quality has improved slightly. You might see some rain this afternoon, and it looks like we're in for a rainy weekend ahead, Saturday and Sunday. It's noon. This is WBEZ.
I'm Reset host Sasha-Ann Simons. President Joe Biden kicked off his re-election campaign with a visit to Chicago and shared his so-called Bidenomics vision. Chicago's air quality was named the worst in the world as smoky air from wildfires in Canada blanket the city. And hundreds of teens gathered in Lakeview, causing damage. Those stories and much more in our weekly news recap. And if you'd like a visual, head over to WBEZ's YouTube and Facebook pages right now so you can watch us break down those stories. It's all happening after the latest headlines from NPR.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. In a decision released today, the Supreme Court struck down a White House program that would have canceled student loan debt for millions of borrowers. NPR's Tamara Keith reports President Biden is expected to respond today.
A White House official tells NPR that President Biden will announce new actions to protect student loan borrowers in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision. Canceling thousands of dollars of student loan debt had been a Biden campaign promise. And now the official who spoke on condition of anonymity said the president will make it, quote, crystal clear to borrowers and their families that Republicans are responsible for denying them the relief that President Biden has been fighting for them to get. Republican presidential candidates, meanwhile, are celebrating the decision, saying Biden's plan was a bailout that would have subsidized the education of elites. Tamara Keith, NPR News, the White House.
The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 along ideological lines that the First Amendment bars Colorado from forcing a website designer to create expressive design speaking messages with which the designer disagrees. The case pitted laws that guarantee same-sex couples equal access to all businesses that offer their services to the public against business owners who see themselves as artists and don't want to use their talents to express a message that they don't believe in. Russia's foreign minister is playing down last weekend's uprising by the Wagner mercenary group against the country's top brass as an insignificant event. The comments coming as Kremlin officials continue to try and limit the political fallout from the rebellion. Here's NPR's Charles Maines.
Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the Wagner rebellion, which saw the mercenaries quickly seize a major southern Russian city and march on the capital last Saturday, was a minor event inflated by the West. Lavrov said Russia had emerged from the incident stronger and more resilient, adding if the West had doubts about that, it was, quote, their problem. In the wake of the Wagner rebellion, the Kremlin has sought to present President Vladimir Putin as having been firmly in control despite offering the mercenaries amnesty in exchange for withdrawing their fighters. Putin has also argued the rebellion ultimately failed because Russian society and the country's security forces united behind the government in support of law and order. Charles Maines, NPR News, Moscow.
Oscar and Tony-winning actor Alan Arkin has died. His manager confirms Arkin's death. The stage and screen actor is perhaps best known for his comic characters. He made over 100 films and was also a familiar face in television. Some of his most memorable roles were from Little Miss Sunshine, Catch-22, Argo, and on the Netflix award-winning series The Kaminsky Method opposite Michael Douglas.
So how's your love life? You're still seeing, what's her name, Trisket?
Tristan, and no.
Oh, that's too bad. She was kind of cute.
Well, we didn't have much to talk about. You know, she was half my age.
Listen, half your age is still an old woman.
Alan Arkin passed away Thursday in California. He was 89 years old. You're listening to NPR News.
It is 12:04, 86 degrees and hazy. Heat index feels like 91. I'm Lisa Labez with WBEZ News. The U.S. Supreme Court today, as we've been hearing, struck down President Biden's student debt relief program. Eligible borrowers would have had up to $20,000 in federal student loans canceled. 3 congressional districts around the Chicago area had the nation's highest response rates to that program. Schaumburg resident Amy Schneider had student debt and is an organizer for an advocacy group called the Debt Collective.
A lot of people, because this got struck down, they're going to start feeling hopeless. Like, people can already not pay their bills as it is. Having to add now, it's like mortgage level costs every month in order to pay their student loans. They're not going to be able to pay that.
A COVID-era pause on federal student loan payments expires in the fall. Borrowers will have to begin making payments in October. The Indiana Supreme Court today ruling that state's abortion ban does not violate the state constitution. So this removes a major hurdle to enforcing the ban Republicans approved last summer. The court's decision overturns a county judge's ruling that the ban likely violates the Indiana Constitution's privacy protections. Minimum wage workers can expect to see an increase of 35 cents in their paychecks if they work in Cook County, and that's going to start tomorrow. The hourly minimum wage goes up to $13.70 for adult workers who are not tipped. Cubs hosting Cleveland this afternoon. The White Sox are in Oakland, and the Sky hosting the LA Sparks. This is WBEZ.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fidelity Investments. A dedicated advisor can help create a wealth plan for a full financial picture. More at fidelity.com/wealth. Investment minimums apply. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. It is noon on a Friday, so you know what that means. It's time for our weekly news recap. And I know I say this every week, yeah, I know, but this truly has been a busy one in Chicago, so let's get into it.
The Chicago area experiencing dangerous air quality for the third day in a row. The city skyline really tells the story, shrouded in that haze.
NASCAR in Chicago. It's almost here.
The fans, they could come on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and just hang out and enjoy the ambiance.
More major road closures have taken effect, snarling traffic ahead of the NASCAR street race in downtown Chicago.
Our panel this week to help us break down those stories and more, Mike Flannery. He is joining us on his last day before retiring as political editor at Fox 32 News. Good to have you with us, Mike.
Well, thank you. It's
Congrats.
an honor to be here.
Derrick Blakley is here, former CBS 2 Chicago politics reporter. Welcome back.
Happy to be here.
And Ben Kesling, Chicago-based reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome back, Ben.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Don't forget that you can also watch the weekly news recap right now. We're on the WBEZ Facebook and YouTube pages. You can also watch the live stream on Reset's Facebook page. Okay, so driving the news this week, a little event that seemed almost ridiculous to some of us. Remember a year ago when it got greenlit? Well, it's here. The world's first ever NASCAR street race has taken over downtown Chicago. I want to go around the table. I mean, what are your thoughts here on this spectacle, Mike?
Well, you know, they've sort of set up a course reminiscent of the Formula One things. I mean, it reminds me of some of those images we've seen from Monte Carlo over the years, you know, and those Europeans, you know, the Euro trash and their big bashes that they hold in concert with that thing. You know, I hope, look, we're committed to it. I hope a zillion people come. I know restaurants and hotels need the business. I hope that people before, after, even during the race, stop in and buy a slice of pizza or a sandwich or have a more sophisticated meal at some of the great spots, and that look, tourism and hospitality is Chicago's number one industry. We are no longer, the city of the big shoulders that Carl Sandburg rhapsodized about more than a century ago. Hotel workers, restaurant workers, docents, the museum workers, that's our number one industry, and I hope they get a shot in the arm.
This could be potentially a great weekend for all of those folks. Are you excited, Ben?
I just wish that the NASCAR track wouldn't be a loop. I wish it would just run all the way up north on Lakeshore Drive so they'd be forced to repave the whole thing properly. They've already done some work. If they could just run it through my neighborhood to get rid of all the potholes and repave it, that'd be fantastic.
So we all benefit.
Hey, I mean, I think the NASCAR coming to Chicago brings up that perennial question of when you bring a big event to a city, what benefits are there? Yeah, money comes in, but does it offset all the pains in the rear that happen to? I mean, you're shutting down a big slice of the city for the July 4th weekend, right? And for hospitality stuff, yeah, like hotel rooms are taken. But does that money go into the Chicago community, or does that go to the hoteliers, who have shareholders elsewhere?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's always that question of, is it worth it? And yeah, I mean, there's going to be lots of opportunities to go get close to the cars. But if you want to actually see the race, I mean, tickets are not cheap.
They are expensive. I think general admission is $260 or $280, and it goes up from there. So they're a lot. That's a lot to consider. I mean, Derrick, street closures downtown, they've left a lot of folks with road rage so far. I got caught up in it earlier this week myself. More road closures, they arrived just yesterday in anticipation of the race. Is the traffic mayhem worth it to get this event here?
Look, we have traffic mayhem every day of the week. And, I used to work downtown and a lot of on weekends. You get the LaSalle Bank Marathon. You can't figure out how to get to your office. This is typical.
Yeah.
This is what big cities are for. And, it's bread and circuses. And to a certain extent, it's a very cold, hard dollars and cents calculation. The city had been shut down out of COVID. The hotels were empty. The conventions weren't coming. Those tourist dollars weren't flowing.
Yeah.
And this is what you do to fill the coffers. We understand when the Taylor Swift weekend, when we had the big volleyball tournament and the Taylor Swift concert, the hotels were filled to 98%. So if that happens,
the all-time record, I believe.
Yeah. If that can be replicated, or you can come close to it, or close to a LaSalle Bank Marathon weekend where you have the runners and their families packing the hotels and the restaurants, we got to pay the bills. We got to keep the lights on.
Why don't we get Taylor Swift to come back and pledge to fill the potholes? That's what I'm concerned about.
But you know what? It's not just the Grant Park area that's feeling this NASCAR vibe, right? Event organizers, they actually tried to fuel excitement for the race in other areas of the city. So I'm thinking of Bubba Wallace, right, who's NASCAR's only top-tier black driver. He held this free event at the DuSable Black History Museum. What was happening there, Derrick?
Well, first he was there with some NASCAR vehicles, and they had a test track for the kids and various activities. NASCAR is viewed, and I don't know if this is totally accurate, but it's viewed as a lower middle class white sport. And those are the demographics that it's associated with. And like every other sport, it wants to broaden its base. It wants to attract new fans. And that's part of the reason they're here.
Yeah.
Get to go off the Daytona track and to be seen in a new environment.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have a great track record, to your point, with the black community, right? I know that it was actually Bubba who called on the organization to ban Confederate flags at the racetracks. This was back in 2020 when they finally did it. So with the event at DuSable, I mean, did it seem like all is forgotten?
Well, I wouldn't say all is forgotten, but I think it's a step in the right direction because as the director of the DuSable Museum said, there are black kids out here, and you advertise the entire realm of racing, not just the cars and the drivers, but the technology, the engineering, the marketing, everything that goes into putting on a spectacle like this. And if it inspires another kid to be the next Bubba Wallace, or maybe to be the next sponsor of a car, or to get into the business, I mean, that's what it's for, and that's what they want. That's why they wanted to come here.
Yeah, our friends online are chiming in. JP Paula says, "I heard the Bubba block party at DuSable Museum, blocks north of 47th Street." Stephen Ford asks a good question. He says, "Do we know if this was intentionally planned to align with July 4th weekend?" Has anyone heard?
I don't think it was an accident. I think they knew what weekend. I don't understand the question.
Yeah. So I mean, everybody remembers the uproar when Mayor Lightfoot announced it. Famously, several of the aldermen in and around the area where the race is being held claimed they were told about 10 or 20 minutes before the mayor's announcement. This was not something So they're very much on the bubble, I think, and they're aware of it. Hence this outreach. And I've heard and I've seen press releases where they want to have reaction from the neighbors after this to see what changes should be made to minimize the disruptions. But Mayor Johnson's made plain, and again, the aldermen now in the post-Lightfoot era who are in allies. They
Yeah.
were not allies of. I'm thinking specifically Brian Hopkins was very much an anti-Lightfoot guy, but is one of the committee chairs recommended by Brandon Johnson. They're in the loop now, and NASCAR is on notice that if this doesn't pay off for Chicago, there's not going to be another one.
This is continuing the perennial trend, though, of a mayor making a decision that the next mayor has to carry through with a smile and try to make it work out. Right?
Yeah. Some people have no choice but to attend the NASCAR events this weekend, and I'm talking about our men and women in blue. Chicago Police Interim Superintendent Fred Waller announced that regular days off would be canceled for officers in order to meet the downtown demand. Let's listen.
That resources in our neighborhoods will not be affected by large events happening downtown and elsewhere. Residents will see an increased presence with more officers on foot patrols and bike patrols in our downtown areas.
So some 900 private security officers will also be working at the race. There will also be increased police presence downtown. Of course, they're anticipating these large crowds during what we just talked about, the 4th of July weekend. Are you going downtown this weekend, Ben?
I will not be going downtown myself.
What about you, Derrick and Mike?
No, I will not be going downtown.
And neither am I.
Yeah.
We've reached a consensus.
Nice. Right. You know, this puts me in mind of something that some friends and I have discussed. We do have these street takeovers by these groups of young drivers who sort of hijack a street corner, and they do tricks and spin the tires in the cars. It's occurred to me, if we were to, could the Park District create a space for something like this so that there wouldn't be the takeovers at night? I mean, again, I think there's an overlap between the folks who do that and the NASCAR activities. I think might be a natural affinity there. And, if the city were to embrace or set up a space where this could be done without being as disruptive, that might be an idea that they could pursue.
The waivers for that would be about 500 pages.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's what the lawyers tell me.
Sounds complicated. This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and it's Friday, so we are breaking down the biggest stories of the week with a panel of world-class local journalists. We've got Fox 32's Mike Flannery, Ben Kesling with the Wall Street Journal, and Derrick Blakley, who's a former politics reporter with CBS 2 Chicago. Don't forget, we're also online. Watch us now at WBEZ's Facebook or YouTube pages. Also, leave us a comment or question. Talk to us in that YouTube chat box, and I may read what you have to say about the stories on the air. All right, time to clear the air about the week's other big story, our bad air quality. I mean, first, anyone concerned that these cars, zooming around at more than 100 miles per hour tomorrow might just make our unhealthy air quality worse?
Well, they won't make it better, but, it's a small drop in the bucket. If you're shutting down Lakeshore Drive and you've got these small number of cars, it might actually reduce the overall amount of air pollution in the city. But, the essential problem is the Canadian smoke.
Easy on the Canadians, okay?
Oh, well, but, I didn't mean to take it.
But yeah,
take it personally. I mean,
Those wildfires in Canada, yes, they caused Chicago to have the world's worst air quality on Tuesday. I mean, have any of you seen our air this bad before?
Never. I never have.
No.
Yeah.
I never have. It really feels like the planet is sick.
You wrote about this, Ben, about the fires for the Wall Street Journal. I mean, what did you learn?
Well, very interesting thing is that there was, generally speaking, so in places like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, places in Canada, there was so much precipitation in the late winter that groundwater is pretty good. But then there's been an onslaught of a drought, a high-pressure system that sort of sat over the middle of the continent, which has both caused low humidity and no rain. So there's no water coming down the plants, and the environment itself is sapping the moisture from these things. So it's creating this like tinderbox of an environment, and that's part of the reason why there's such we're so prone to wildfires right now.
So what this was, as you were working on this air quality story, I mean, were the scientists pointing to it then as evidence of our climate change crisis?
I think that climate change is a given at this point, but there are anomalous factors in any time you're dealing with weather. This could just be a horrible weather snap that we're going through, and that could be it, right? And I think that something we need to look at is not just the weather itself, but how do we deal with this stuff as an international community? How do we deal with firefighting? How do we deal with giving resources to each other? There's a really interesting bunch of compacts that some of the Great Lakes states and Canadian provinces have to do firefighting. But a lot of them are sort of informal networks that are held together with handshakes. And if somebody is dealing with, if multiple provinces and states are dealing with wildfires, there's not a lot of extra help to go around. So it's worth looking at the way that we fight fires and manage forests themselves.
The whole issue of managing air quality. You can't build a wall. It's a tough problem.
Yeah.
If one jurisdiction isn't managing the situation the way you would like.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, that's right. And I mean, so you have to, just like when we deal across international borders or in places like the Arctic or the Antarctic, communities and countries have to learn how to deal with these things together to mitigate some of these negative effects.
Yeah. Our viewer Steven on YouTube says, I have bad allergies, especially to campfire smoke. So the air quality this week's been really difficult for me. Wow, Stephen. I mean, I felt it on Tuesday particularly. And it took a second. It was just this slow seeping into my lungs where throughout the day, my chest started hurting. And then my throat was kind of scratchy. And then my eyes were burning. It was just kind of this progression.
And I got a press release from the Lung Association, maybe somebody in the last few days saying that standing outside for 10 hours or something was equivalent to, in this smoking 12 cigarettes.
That's right, half a pack of cigarettes a day. Yeah, that came from a lung specialist out of Northwestern who we had on the program earlier this week. I mean, we've gotten used to seeing these wildfires out west, but from what you learned, Ben, can we expect that we might see more across the country then in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, the wildfires are not going away. Again, going back to sort of climate change and whatnot. Whatever the cause of climate change may be, the climate is changing, and that is going to cause anomalous weather patterns. It's going to cause more fires, and again, going back to the manpower aspect of this, what are we doing to fund how we deal with this stuff? How's the Department of the Interior looking to take care of some of this and deal with?
But it's happening in the northern latitudes all around the world. Siberia, eastern Siberia and central Siberia has over the last several years had unprecedented
fires,
forest fires and tundra fires that have covered dozens of square miles at a time, and it's not, it's all over the world.
Chris White on YouTube says, it's like we all live next to General Iron this week.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I cover a lot of military and veteran stuff, and there's this sort of commentary going around with the veteran community to say, hey, this is a reminder why we need to care about things like burn pits and the way that veterans have breathed all this stuff in combat zones, and we take for granted the dulcet breezes coming off of the lake, and we have great air quality, and it's a good reminder, I think, to everybody, hey, this isn't here guaranteed to us, and we need to be stewards and do a better job of taking care of this.
I was even happy to see rain this week too. I was like, come on down, right? A few folks started wearing masks again. I was one of them. What about you guys? Did you grab your COVID masks out of the vault?
I did not, but I didn't look askance at anybody who did. They had a good reason to do it.
For sure. And closing your windows, avoiding being outside. Did we do all that?
I did that. I didn't do the masks. I didn't do that, but I did close all the windows, and I turned on the air purifier that we got during the COVID season for when people came over. I've had that going over time.
Yeah. Let's take a pause. We have covered this week's poor air quality and NASCAR preparations, but we're just getting started, folks. There's more news to get to. First, we'll make a quick pit stop to get the latest headlines from Lisa Labuz. On your mark, get set, go, Lisa.
Vroom, vroom. All right. President Biden says he's going to have more to say today when he speaks to the nation on the student loan Ruling from the Supreme Court, Mr. Biden had proposed a $400 billion plan to cancel or reduce federal student loan debt for millions of borrowers. The plan was challenged, though, in court by a group of Republican-led states and others, and a sharply divided high court today ruling the Biden administration had overstepped its authority in trying to cancel or reduce that loan debt. The nation's midsection is heading into this 4th of July weekend, and instead of enjoying the start of summer, people are facing smoky haze, high temperatures, and powerful derecho winds that knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of residents. Utility crews are scrambling to restore electricity after that storm front moved across Illinois and Indiana yesterday, packing winds of more than 70 miles per hour. And a new women's pro hockey league will begin competing in North America as early as January. A co-owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers has purchased a 7-team Premier Hockey Federation. It isn't immediately known how many teams there will be or their locations. I will just throw my vote in for Chicago right there. Cubs are hosting Cleveland this afternoon. The White Sox are in Oakland tonight, and the Sky hosting LA this evening.
Wherever news is breaking,
NPR News, Beirut.
NPR News, Mexico City.
NPR News, Paris.
the NPR newscast takes you there. Listen live every hour on the hour.
Here at 91.5 WBEZ Chicago.
I'm Peter Sagal. On this week's Wait, we talk about the Russian Revolution that wasn't and why the Democratic nominee for president won't be based on who has the best abs, we hope. Join us for the News Quiz from NPR. Saturday morning at 10 on WBEZ.
WBEZ is supported by the Pritzker Military Museum, presenting Tet and the Battle of Hue, an exhibit featuring photography and tactile images of Marines during a pivotal battle in the Vietnam War. More at pritzkermilitary.org. Support is provided by Lollapalooza, returning August 3rd through the 6th. 4 days of live music with performances from Kendrick Lamar, Billie Eilish, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and more. 4-day tickets are available now at lala.com. Weather forecast. So, the air quality has improved a little bit around the Chicago area. It's still hazy and it's hot. 88 degrees right now at O'Hare, and we're seeing a heat index of 91. We still have an air quality advisory in Northwest Indiana. This is WBEZ.
This is Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons, and we are back with more of our weekly news recap. Now, before the break, our panel of journalists got us up to speed on preparations for the NASCAR street race this weekend. Time to get back on track with the rest of the week's news.
President Biden comes to town.
The president trying to stir up enthusiasm and some campaign cash during his trip to the home of the 2024 DNC.
Greeted by Governor Pritzker, Mayor Johnson, and Senators Durbin and Duckworth as he ramps up his re-election efforts, focusing on the economy.
The president saying new bridges and highways and broadband and jobs help make a stronger U.S. economy than we had under President Trump, and helps him make a better argument for why he deserves a second term.
At the table with me today is Derrick Blakley, veteran journalist and former CBS 2 politics reporter, Ben Kesling, Chicago-based reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and Mike Flannery, political editor at Fox 32 News. Don't forget, you can also watch us break down the news right now on WBEZ's Facebook and YouTube pages. Okay, President Biden was in town Wednesday for a whirlwind visit. He gave a speech at the old post office building highlighting so-called Bidenomics. Let's listen.
I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I really didn't. I now claim it, but they're the ones who used it first.
So he's giving you the credit, Ben.
Hey, I didn't come up with the name, right?
It was your editorial page.
You're with the Wall Street Journal. So,
okay,
so
all right, fine.
You, as our resident expert today, give us some insight into the use of the term Bidenomics, will you?
Okay, so I think it's, well, first of all, I don't know if the Democrats and if the Biden administration have been flogging Bidenomics enough. It doesn't get a lot of coverage, the Inflation Reduction Act and what the investments have come from that. It really doesn't get a whole lot of coverage in the States. Like if you look at, if you read newspapers like Financial Times, right, that does a lot of European coverage, you'll see more, I feel like you see more coverage of IRA investment there because they focus on the European companies that are quite upset at the incentives and the investments that are available in the United States right now. We're seeing a lot of that in the upper Midwest, right? Like Michigan with battery investment and EV stuff, Indiana, whatnot. But Bidenomics is the administration's sort of effort to put a label on something to be able to point to it and say, here are our successes, rather than getting picked apart for not having any. But at the same time, when you put a label on something to say, here's what we've done, it also gives everybody a target to say, that's Bidenomics, and you sort of give the boogeyman a name, right?
And what you're really talking about is incentivizing various industries that you want to see grow in America, whether it's semiconductors or electronic vehicles or solar panels or whatever.
Right. As one of my colleagues, Greg Ip, wrote about a lot of this, is at the beginning of the administration, Biden was focused on a lot of macroeconomic issues, right? Dealing with inflation, dealing with unemployment, trying to get Federal Reserve policy all untangled. And now he's pointing to some of these microeconomic things.
Yeah, what else did he have to say Wednesday?
The bigger picture really is looking at Bidenomics and how they're building out the selling of this it is going to build stuff, right? It's the infrastructure. Like I've seen what we have. The big joke was under the previous administration. Every week was infrastructure week, right?
Yes.
But it seemed like there was, what was delivered on that, and the Biden administration is now picking up and saying we're going to start delivering on this. But the problem with doing infrastructure is it takes a long time to build infrastructure. So you can start those programs, but it doesn't, put a chicken in the pot for normal consumers, and it takes a while to see things. Like, I'm not going to see those potholes filled out in front of my house for a while, even if that's moving. So I think it's important.
I'm just fascinated by the public perceptions. Here in Illinois, we had in May for the last numbers we have for unemployment. It was at 3.2% here in the Chicago metro on unemployment, which is the all-time low for the month of May. Now, there are obviously pockets of problems. Young black men in the city, in some parts of the city, 50% plus unemployment. It's not to gainsay that, but nonetheless, the overall number is, at 3.2, that's an all-time record low. Nationally, I think it's hovering 3.0, somewhere in that vicinity.
And in fact, black unemployment is at an all-time low.
Yeah.
Which has not been talked about almost at all.
Yeah. Correct. And but when you look at the voter opinion surveys, only 36% of American voters say they think the economy is excellent or even good. And only 24% give Biden, say they approve of Biden's handling of the economy.
Yeah, his rating is low on that.
I mean, to go back to the macroeconomic picture, though, is unemployment comes down. Like, if you look at the Federal Reserve, the bank's mandate, and we have the Federal Reserve of Chicago here doing a lot of this work. The mandate is price stability, right, and employment. Those two things go hand in hand, right? So as that employment number comes down, price stability or inflation starts to get out of whack, and that's something that. And
yet the new number was in the most closely watched index that the Fed says they watch. It was the last month only 0.1%. I mean, which is 1.2% on an annualized basis. I mean, that's substantially below the 2% target. So and then I'm fascinated too by the term Bidenomics. I mean, it was coined by your employer's editorial page. Not me. It's a term that was intended as an insult because they see Bidenomics representing this free spending, wasteful spending, and assert that it's been linked to inflation. But now, just like Obamacare was originally intended as an insult.
Yeah. Don't we all remember Reaganomics?
Well, it began apparently with Nixonomics. as long as the president has an N as the last letter of his name or her name.
Millard Fillmore-onomics. Yeah,
well, Biden was also here for 2 fundraisers, right? So give us the details of that, Mike.
Well, I mean, the low end tickets I think were $3,300, and then the sky's always the limit after that. Wow. If you wanted to, I think it was $25,000 or more. If you wanted to get a picture with the president, president.
Does that come with a NASCAR ticket?
And this was hosted by Governor Pritzker and his wife.
His wife, MK, and former Mayor Lightfoot was there. Brandon Johnson, the current mayor, obviously was there, and a host of not just Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth, but a host of other public officials. And then there was a more private reception after that. And believe me, I think in terms of what the White House was thinking and the political operation around President Biden, that was the real purpose of this visit, was to collect those big bucks from those fundraisers. Mm-hmm. But I, like you, Ben, I found the speech provocative, especially when you look at those numbers and then you look at the public perception. I mean, the president's got a heavy lift here. People are not happy, and I think that, there's a lag time in the public perceptions. People are still. I had somebody the other day complaining about egg prices, and because I had gone to the store, they've fallen by 70% from the high, but people still remember that.
That's very interesting. It's like the egg price stuff, right? Is no matter when they come down. I got 4 kids, right? So holy smokes, those kids will suck down some eggs in the morning, right? And even if the prices have come down, you remember where they were, and that perception is something that like anchors people to that memory of inflation. So everybody can point to the egg prices, even though if you go to the store right now, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of that fundraiser, Derrick, President Biden gave a lot of praise to Pritzker during the visit. Biden said Pritzker helped him win the White House in 2020. So how big of an ally would you say Pritzker's become to the president? Talk about that.
Well, Illinois isn't in play anymore. I mean, we're not a swing state. But Pritzker does form a central place in that kind of blue wall that they talked about in the upper Midwest. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a symbiotic thing. Pritzker certainly wanted the Democratic National Convention to come here. It's coming here. He perhaps was looking at it as a jump off for his own national ambitions, perhaps to run for president, not this time, but maybe down the line. And, he's full of money, and he's got a lot of friends that are full of money. So all of that helps the president, and all of that helps J.B. Pritzker as well.
Don't you think he I'm put in mind of 2004 when Barack Obama, then the newly actually he hadn't yet been elected. He was the nominee, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate, and he spoke at the Boston Democratic Convention then, delivered that there's not red Americans or red states, blue states, and made a huge national splash. I think Pritzker's perhaps dreaming of a featured speaking role and making a big splash like that. We'll see what happens. But I had the governor in as a guest on my program a few weeks ago, and based on the conversation that we had, he and Joe Biden talk at least once a week, maybe more often than that.
Oh, wow.
And they see each other a lot. I think Pritzker has taken a huge item off of the Biden campaign's plate by guaranteeing that he's going to raise enough money to pay for the convention. Mm-hmm. And because he's got that multi-billion-dollar private fortune, the White House and Joe Biden don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry about paying for this convention. And, often conventions end up at a deficit. So that's a huge item, and I'm sure the president's grateful for that.
So we can expect our governor to get more national attention, it sounds like, right? Especially as we lead up to the convention next year. And while in town, I got to mention, Biden also announced his pick to replace Chicago's outgoing U.S. Attorney John Lausch. Mike, who's April Perry?
She worked in the state's attorney's office, has worked for State's Attorney Fox. She's a black woman who has been, I think, the chief ethics officer there for Fox.
She worked for 12 years as a federal prosecutor
and has
here in
been
Chicago.
and knows that U.S. Attorney's office from her service there. She's the first black woman to serve in that office. I know the president was. I'm sure pleased with that. He's paid particular attention to that as he makes key appointments.
Yeah.
This U.S. Attorney's office here has been most identified in the public mind, I think, over the years with political corruption, prosecutions and investigations, and she's going to inherit two trials that are coming up on that score. Former House Speaker Mike Madigan and former Alderman Eddie Burke, who was the longest-serving member of the Chicago City Council ever.
Yeah.
So she's going to be in charge of that. Presumably not going to make a lot of changes. I'm sure that team is in place. That trial's ready to go.
And her nomination now has to go to the Senate's Judiciary Committee and then the full Senate for a vote. We'll take a quick pause right here, folks. The panel's not going anywhere. We've got a few more stories that we just have to talk about. But first, Looking Glass Theater in Chicago is cutting staff and producing fewer shows next year. Lisa's got the details.
Yeah, Sasha, the acclaimed company issuing a statement today saying it is feeling the effects of the COVID shutdown and audiences and donations are not returning to pre-pandemic levels. The Tribune reports Looking Glass is downsizing its full-time staff from 24 to 10. It will pause programming until late spring next year. Oscar and Tony Award-winning actor Alan Arkin has died. Arkin is best known for comic characters and was an early member of Chicago's Second City comedy troupe. He performed in more than 100 movies, including Catch-22, also Argo and Edward Scissorhands. Arkin was 89 years old. Now, there's a family of foxes living in Millennium Park, and they're not probably going to be NASCAR's biggest fans this weekend. Liza Lehrer with the Lincoln Park Zoo's Urban Wildlife Institute says the foxes and other downtown critters are probably going to hunker down during the noisiest parts of race weekend, but she says the event is unlikely to affect these animals in the long term. You're listening to WBEZ.
WBEZ's fiscal year ends today, and we are still short of our membership goal. Your support today is critical to the future of independent news in Chicago. Give right now at WBEZ.org/donate.
Now, we still have $101,000 to go to reach our goal before we close our books tonight at midnight. WBEZ is supported by your membership and by Goodman Theater, presenting The Who's Tony Award winner Des McAnuff and The Who's Pete Townsend reunite to reimagine this new musical production now through August 6th. GoodmanTheater.org.
I'm Peter Sagal. On this week's Wait, we talk about the Russian Revolution that wasn't and why the Democratic nominee for president won't be based on who has the best abs, we hope. Join us for the News Quiz from NPR. Saturday morning at 10 on WBEZ.
Time is ticking down on our fiscal year, and in order to meet our critical funding goals, WBEZ needs your support. $10, $100, $1,000. Find a donation amount that works for you, and please give now at WBEZ.org/donate.
Partly sunny skies, a hot day, a high near 91, and a good chance you might see some showers and thunderstorms. There's a pretty strong band of rain south of Chicago, south and west. Cloudy tonight, 40% chance of showers overnight, a low of 70, and then cloudy on Saturday, 60% chance of rain, and a 60% chance of showers as well on Sunday. This is WBEZ.
And we're back now with more Reset. I'm your host, Sasha-Ann Simons. We're back with more of our weekly news recap, giving you a closer look at the week's top stories across Chicago and Illinois. Now, before the break, we looked closely at President Biden's visit to Chicago, but we've got more to get to. We're still live on YouTube and Facebook for those who prefer to watch, and we're still taking your questions and comments in the chat box. Our panelists today are the Wall Street Journal's Ben Kesling, veteran politics reporter Derrick Blakley, and Fox 32's Mike Flannery. All right, Chicago School Board President Miguel Del Valle is stepping down as his 4-year term expires. That's a big appointment for Mayor Johnson. So, I mean, do you think, Mike, that his pick will come under additional scrutiny because of close ties to the teachers union?
Yes, everything that he does with the school board is going to be under close scrutiny.
They're watching like a hawk, aren't they?
Yeah, but the teachers union has enormous sway within the Chicago City Council. I would imagine that whoever he picks is going to have smooth sailing and will be ratified. And it highlights the fact that by 2027, he won't have any picks. And the mayor will be out of the business of putting people on and taking people off the school board. It's going to be fully elected. And, you know, the General Assembly this past session, in a little noticed matter, put together a map for the new soon-to-be all-elected Chicago School Board. paying close attention to all of that and having a big role in that map was the Chicago Teachers Union. They're going to, my prediction is they're going to control and they're going to run the Chicago School Board.
You know, if you stay around here long enough, everything seems to go in circles. When Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley, came in, he wanted control of the school system. He went to Springfield, got legislation passed to have it under his control, so there couldn't be any of this buck passing in terms of who was actually responsible for school success, school failure. Now we've kind of come full circle to where the mayor is going to be able to say it's a school board's fault. He can deflect any school crises, and I don't know if it makes him more responsible to the public because it's an elected board, but that responsibility is also diffuse. It's not focused on one person.
Any speculation, Mike, on top candidates to replace Del Valle?
I haven't reported that. I don't.
I haven't heard anything.
I don't have that. But if I could just say, just for a moment, just say something about Miguel Del Valle. I mean, I've known him for 40-plus years. He was the first Puerto Rican, the first Hispanic state senator. He's always been, clean and honorable and a decent guy. And he was a good choice, I thought, by Lori Lightfoot. She originally appointed him, and his 4-year terms expired. But in terms of who Mayor Johnson's thinking about, I'm not sure. But it will be a close ally of the teachers union. You can count on.
Any ideas from you, Derrick, as to who could
I don't have a clue.
Step in?
No.
We'll see. Well, sticking with you, Derrick, the mayor's got another important pick coming up, and I'm talking about the next police superintendent. So where are we with that process?
Well, the board, the community-based board that is doing the pre-screening process, reportedly has it down to 6 finalists. All of them have some relationship to the Chicago Police Department or some experience within the department. I'll give you the names. Larry Snelling is the current chief of the Counterterrorism Bureau, and he's a former Inglewood district commander. That's one of the toughest districts in the city. Ernest Cato II, or I should say the third, is a former counterterrorism chief who was a candidate for the superintendency that got passed over the last time around, and he retired from the department abruptly last year. Then we have 3 other candidates: Sean Barnes, who is currently police chief in Madison, Wisconsin, and he also worked for the COPA office, the Police Accountability Office. Magdalia Bolness, who's a CPD deputy chief now. She was also finalist to be Evanston police chief. Angel Novoles, who is chief of CPD Constitutional Policing and Reform, and Donna Rowling, who's an attorney and commander of the Labor Relations Division.
So we got some diversity there, right? 3 black candidates, 2 Latino candidates, 1 white candidate. 2 of the candidates are women.
Yes,
right?
Yes, exactly. I don't know if there's any handicapping going on, but I would say Snelling or Cato, if off the top of my head.
Why?
Well, because they have a combination of significant community support that has bubbled up, and they've worked in the toughest districts in the city, and they also have that high-level counterterrorism experience that's very crucial. Snelling also is said to be an expert within the department on use of force training and constitutional policing, which is key to police reform. They seem to fit the bill in that sense. Not that the others don't, but they have deep experience.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The Civilian Oversight Commission, they're supposed to deliver the top 3 picks to the mayor by July 14th, which, I mean, that's 2 weeks from now. And he's supposed to pick 1, but he doesn't have to, technically. Right?
No, but I think Lori Lightfoot and Rahm Emanuel went away from the chosen pre-screened candidates. So I think he probably will because he says he believes in this process. I was rather upset, just personally. The 19 aldermen complained that Brian McDermott, who's the CPD patrol chief, was not interviewed.
Yes.
And
they wrote a letter.
Yes, through a letter. And the commission kind of brushed that off as typical political interference. If you're having a transparent process and you want to hear from everybody, you don't want the opinion of these 19 aldermen? That seems to be, what we call transparency, that seems to be almost too big of a backlash. Because,
Interesting.
They're transparent in saying this guy should have been interviewed. I don't see that as putting the thumb on the scale too much.
I think one thing worth noting is what Lightfoot and Rahm did in circumventing this process is no longer doable. Brandon Johnson doesn't have, under the new law that has created this community commission, Anthony Driver is the president of that's doing the screening.
Who was not happy, by the way, with that.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Interjection by the 19 aldermen.
Right. But Brandon Johnson has to follow this process. So he has to pick one of these nominees that will be there by Bastille Day on July 14th, or have them go back and give him 3 more names.
Yeah. Well, onto something very different, Ben. Hundreds of thousands celebrated peacefully in Lakeview last Sunday at the Midwest's largest pride parade. But unfortunately, the next night, Lakeview residents say that hundreds of teens were causing chaos in the neighborhood. What happened there?
Hundreds of teenagers came on the public transportation system, ended up at a street corner and hung out for hours and damaged vehicles and drinking in the streets. But there were only 2 arrests throughout the whole process. And I think that event and how it was handled by the police, what the police feel that they're able to do to control situations like that, what the police should do in situations like that. I think it speaks also to the tough job that a new head of the police will have. Chicago is in a spot. If you talk to police walking the beats, they don't necessarily feel like they are fully empowered all the time to do things, which could be a good thing. It prevents abuse of power. It prevents police from acting abruptly, but also it begs a question of if events like this that we saw in Lakeview can happen again and with impunity, which is not necessarily a good thing for folks who live in the community.
I just saw a lot of chatter about this on social media.
We are told that, and we've been told this for years, that police, monitor social media and are on the lookout for things like this, civil disturbances. Usually it's at the terrorism level, but now it's come down to these youth activities. But the police always seem to be caught off guard. They're caught off guard when these things happened, like on the South Lakefront at 31st Street, downtown, now the North Side. And I'm wondering if they should be reaching out to some of these groups and trying to figure out their communication so they can get ahead of the wave.
Even in situations like this, even if they get ahead of it, they see what's going to happen, there's a way in which what's to be done? What are you going to do? Crack down on teenagers and say,
right?
There's an aspect of,
well, if they're damaging cars and bouncing up and down of my car, I would like them to at least tell them, hey, get off.
That seems to be a sentiment of a lot of people who had vehicles in that area. But at the same time,
we need to acknowledge the reality. The minute a white officer, let's stipulate it's a white officer, getting out of the car, putting his hands on a teenager, breaking windows, smashing up a car, hundreds of cell phones will instantly be on, and if so every officer sees his pension disappearing and sees himself suspended and facing multiple lawsuits. that's why they don't get out of the car.
And I mean, there's also an aspect of it that goes beyond that to when you interact with someone as a police officer, right? There's what's going to happen in that interaction.
Well, somebody punches you in the nose, and then
could it escalate? And
it escalates. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was a hot mess, however you slice it, that night in Lakeview. Well, I don't want us to run out of time before acknowledging that after 50 years on the Chicago politics beat, Mike Flannery, you're retiring.
I am retiring.
Congratulations.
I'm going to join Derrick Blakley in becoming permanently unemployed. We're going to
10 mayors, 8 governors. I mean, 5 decades. What stands out to you if you had to pick one thing?
Well, it was the period that a brilliant comedian named Aaron Freeman dubbed Council Wars, with Darth Verdoliak and a whole cast of characters that he took from City Hall. That people said. I had several people say to me last winter during this recently completed mayoral election, "Oh, the city's on fire. There's so much. Everybody's polarized here." I said, "Really?" I remember 1983 when Harold was first elected, Harold Washington, and 1987 when he got reelected. The voter turnout was 90%. This time it was what, 38, 36, 30, 38%?
Yeah, something like that.
The city's not on fire. That was a far more intense, far more polarizing experience to cover as a journalist than anything I've done during the Trump era. Or during the Brandon Johnson versus Lightfoot and Paul Vallis era, that was a searing experience. And if I were going back over the 50 years to find something that illuminates the current moment, it would be that. I mean, I remember going to dinner and having this guy who had been overserved coming up to me as I'm sitting eating dinner and takes a swing at me. Fortunately, he was so drunk he fell over. But that's the way it was.
You got a question on YouTube. Any parting advice, real quick, for folks who are still going to be covering politics in this city? What would you say?
Yeah, I'd like to, as important as it is to pay attention to your bosses and to the people in the newsroom, I've always tried to solicit feedback outside the newsroom and to connect with people outside. I think that's the advice I'd give somebody. Listen to what people are saying. They particularly when you're in the TV business, as Derrick knows, your life is sort of a rolling focus group, right? People come up to you with saying things, and then at the state level and even in the metro, one thing. A baleful development, something that really does pain me, is picking up on some of the current terminology, the news deserts that are developing out in the suburbs and in downstate where there are clusters of 6 and 8 and 9 counties where there's nobody covering the county board, there's nobody covering the city council, there's nobody monitoring.
Yeah, that has to change.
What's going on? Yeah, that's a baleful development, and that doggone Facebook, and I mean, I like. Speaking of the Canadians, let's give them credit for an experiment. They want to make Facebook pay for what they currently steal here in the U.S., which is the work of Ben, Derrick, and people like me.
Yeah.
They steal it in the sense that people post the link, and we get nothing. They're gonna in Canada. They're gonna start making them pay.
Canada.
And we'll see if that works.
All right, I got to go. We're going to leave it there. Shout out to you, Mike. Congratulations again, Mike Flannery, Derrick Blakley, veteran politics reporter, and Ben Kesling of the Wall Street Journal. Thank you all so much for being here today. Have a good weekend. That is it for Reset. I'm Sasha-Ann Simons. Thank you so much for listening. Have a safe weekend, and we will meet again soon.
It is 12:59. Lots of news to talk about. Heading just ahead, we're going over to Here and Now. We'll hear about today's two big Supreme Court decisions. We'll also talk about affirmative action from a couple of days ago. It's 12:59. You're listening to WBEZ. Support is provided by ComEd. ComEd is helping local public schools identify energy efficiency projects and